My latest poll on the Community Tabs page: should President Trump fire FBI Director Kash Patel? And one of the rare times, I think, where I've put up a poll that I completely disagree with the results on when it comes to my community voting. I think you guys are all a bunch of stupid morons for this one. Only 19% of 720 total votes so far voted that yes, Kash Patel has failed us and should be fired, while 81% somehow think Kash Patel is doing good work. And so, I gotta say this. I don't know what you all are thinking, but when I talk about how there's clearly some sort of divide fracturing the MAGA party, the Republican Party as a whole, this is actually an example of that, in my opinion. Kash Patel has been an abysmal failure. He literally is one of the few people I've ever seen in my lifetime actively campaign for director of the FBI. I mean, he cared this much about obtaining this role back in 2022, 2023. He was all over the place talking about how they were dropping the ball, how corrupt they were, how they weren't transparent enough, and how they were blatantly hiding the Epstein client list and the Epstein Files from us, all while delivering promises that it would be so much different if he could just become director of the FBI. If Trump could win, and if Trump would appoint him, he would release all of the information on the Epstein Files, the JFK files, the MLK files, etc. He would expose all of the government secrets that they've been hiding from us. He would be ultimately way more transparent than in the past. And he essentially stated that he would turn the current corrupt FBI headquarters into a deep state museum. I mean, his promises were amazing. And then he becomes director of the FBI and basically does none of it. He becomes director of the FBI, and all of a sudden, Epstein, in fact, did kill himself in his cell. The Epstein Files are basically just CSAM material that will never be released, and you need to stop asking for it because you're a dirty pervert to even ask for the Epstein Files when we're telling you it's all CSAM material. I mean, that's just gross. At this point, stop asking. It's weird, bro. That's literally the FBI with Pam Bondi's messaging. There was no list. Stop asking. There were no names. Epstein only trafficked these women to himself. That's all that he did. He was just some very suspiciously wealthy guy who bought an island to just be alone to himself, and he ran a trafficking ring for just himself. Then he ultimately killed himself. I mean, I view that as an absolute failure because it was the one thing Kash Patel was known for, and he did not deliver. And now he's being forced to deliver. And I have a feeling when he does deliver, it's going to be a major disappointment because of him. Not because of what's there, because of him. I expect heavily redacted documents, straight up. Lack of transparency, unlike what was promised. And it looks terrible. Nevertheless, let's take a look at what you guys said in the comments down below. Maybe I can get some insight onto why people think this way. Glenn says, he's like Pam Bondi. No arrest and no prosecutions and no imprisoned criminals. They are obviously part of the swamp. And at some level, I agree. Obviously, Pam Bondi is ultimately the deciding factor in the Trump DOJ, so it's not on Kash Patel for there not being any prosecutions or imprisoned criminals. That is purely Pam Bondi's fault. But I do agree with the arrest part. We have not seen any major arrests, and Pam Bondi's mostly to blame for that too, but Kash Patel is certainly playing a role there. John Reichenberger says, Kash and Dan are making the FBI great again. Smiley face heart. And to you, I just have to ask why. Why do you think that? Kenneth Lowe 5747. I recognize this guy. He's commented on some of my other stuff before. He says, this is why you won't even know whenever they will not see the hammer of justice come downtown on their corrupt asses. That's right. That would include the corrupt media system mob. Okay. I'm still waiting on that. Harpo 77 says, those only the Epstein list still free. Those stealing tax dollars still free. Those who forged Biden's name to all of his work still free. Antifa still free to fight ICE. Even Soros, the man funding this bullshit, is still free. We need leaders and directors with the balls to arrest and charge these morons. Yeah, dude, I completely agree with that, especially the whole Antifa situation. Where are the investigations into the Antifa scumbags who are throwing rocks at our ICE officers, who are making threats against our ICE officers? Where's the updates on that? Whatever is happening to that? It makes me sick to watch the footage, in fact, of ICE being protested actively and violently by Antifa members with seemingly no consequences. Every once in a while, you'll see ICE combined with the might of the National Guard or something, drag a couple of Antifa protesters away from the crowd and arrest them. But that should be happening at a much more frequent scale, and the FBI should be involved in this because this is a criminal conspiracy, in my opinion, and it most likely is backed by George Soros. So where's the investigations? Where are the results? That's the main thing here. Where are the Epstein files? Where's any of it? Brian Underdahl 7974 says, Kash Patel deserves to get fired, but Trump will keep him around. Yeah, that's probably true. While Wild Bassist. As a wild guitarist myself, I like that name. He says, I am a fan of the... yeah. Hey, you know, I don't know. When it comes to Kash Patel, I wouldn't say he's committing treason here, but he's certainly doing a terrible job. Keystone Liberty 1776 says, when you have a government agency that shouldn't exist in the first place, how can you expect anything good to come out of it? 100% agree. One of my most loyal viewers here, Keystone. Appreciate you, man. And again, it's absolutely true. I've actually mentioned this before. We have way too many three-letter word organizations within this government that simply should not exist. I think ranking number one on that list should be the CIA. I think they've gotten America into a lot more trouble than needed. I think the letter C in CIA stands for corruption. You know, one of the greatest presidents of all time, JFK, he knew this to be true as well, which ultimately is probably what sealed his fate. CIA needs to go. FBI needs to go. We have too many of these intelligence agencies that are doing absolutely nothing for us and in fact are working against the best interest of the American people. Umpire 29 says 20% must think Christopher Wray is a fine fella. Now, I hate that argument. I hate that because again, that goes back to what I was mentioning earlier in this episode even, where our Republican congressmen, our politicians that we elect as Republicans don't represent us. And it's no longer good enough in this day and age for the younger generations, especially for them to simply be Republicans or for them to simply not be as bad as the other guy. And so this whole argument of, well, he's not Christopher Wray, so he's doing a good job. It's just not true. It just isn't. Kash Patel overpromised and has severely underdelivered, basically giving us next to nothing. I mean, what has the guy bragged about so far being director of the FBI? Arresting street-level drug dealers? I expect that to happen at a local level. Regular police officers are capable of doing that if they weren't so busy writing stupid speeding tickets. I don't need my director of the FBI to be telling me, oh, but, you know, we arrested 4,000 drug dealers in America. Okay, good. Where are the high-profile names being investigated and arrested? We all know the names. We all know what we actually want here, and it's not being given to us. So yeah, he's not Christopher Wray. Good job, Kash. You're not a vile, corrupt scumbag like Christopher Wray. You're just instead a gutless, spineless coward who realizes that you're putting your neck on the line by delivering the promises you made, and all of a sudden, you don't want to do it. That's not good enough. It's not going to fly anymore. William Lane says, he meant well. I think somebody got to him. Yeah, maybe. Heyoika says, we can trust him. That's got to be rage bait. User JLJ says, show us some high-profile arrests, and maybe he would not be considered a failure. Just like his boss, Pam Blondie. Couldn't agree with you more, man. Libs are cooked. I recognize this guy. He's commented on my stuff before. Thanks for the support, man. He says, he's a clown. No politician arrested yet. WTF. Yeah, I don't think we're ever going to see that day either, unfortunately. Jeff Miller, 7817. I recognize this guy. He's actually, I would consider him one of my most loyal haters. Definitely a super liberal guy. Looks like he's the kind of guy that had the time of his life catching waves on the West Coast while Democrat policy just wreaked havoc on his state, but he couldn't be bothered because he's definitely a boomer. Nevertheless, he says, Kash Patel never should have had the job in the first place. No actual qualifications, which makes him a typical Trump pick. He has done nothing but screw up the FBI while doing nothing but Trump's bidding. Only fools think otherwise. Sad, but all true. Yeah, you know, the saddest thing about this is I read this guy's comments all the time when he posts stuff like this, and I usually think he's a moron, and I don't agree with almost anything he says, and I think he's full of emotional slop for the most part, but I halfway agree with this comment. That's sad. Jeff Wolf 8018 says, I lost respect with all of them when they said Epstein killed himself and there's nothing burger for the files. Clearly somebody's gotten to them, as this is the opposite they were saying months or weeks before they were in government. And that is really the saddest thing of all, isn't it? I've said this before, but it seems like Kash Patel especially, and Dan Bongino for that matter, deputy director, they knew a lot more about those Epstein files, the Epstein client list, the investigations before they took those positions. And now all of a sudden, it only took, 6 weeks of them holding those positions where they just don't seem to know anything. And most embarrassingly was when Kash Patel was being grilled by Thomas Massie on it, and Kash Patel kept deferring to his staff. Well, I don't know. My staff looked at those files. I didn't look at those ones. I don't know. I trust my staff, though. Do you? Do you trust your staff, Kash Patel? If so, why? What about the FBI in general and the staff that works there that clearly has had a hand in its corruption over the years? Do you trust? What do you trust about them and why. Can't explain that one, can you? And for those reasons alone, that's why I personally completely disagree with apparently 81% of my community here when it comes to Kash Patel, because he absolutely should be fired, and he should have been fired months ago. I personally think he's compromised, but that's just my opinion. Let me know what your opinion is in the comments down below on this video. If you enjoyed that clip, be sure to check out my YouTube channel where I have the full video where this clip was taken from published. And if you're America First like I am and you're an American advocate, be sure to subscribe and like the post. Thanks so much for watching.